Hello, friends. It's time for Talk for Dodge, the show that uncovers the stories behind the houses and the heart of our community. I'm Jeremiahjcondon.
And I'm Todd McCubbin. Today, we will answer the question, how can young professionals get involved in our community and why would they want to? But before we get into that, let's do a quick market update.
Market update. We have 74 active listings in Fort Dodge as of today. And when we looked up compared to 2023 year to date, we have more new listings, we have more pendings, and more closed sales than we did last year starting out in 2023.
And that's great news for anybody wanting to buy or sell a house, just saying, you know what, the market's starting to come back. And I think people are getting used to the higher interest rates and kind of what's happening with the real estate world. So, no, that's good. Hopefully 2024 continues that way.
Yeah, the one shocking thing is we have the average sales that have closed so far have been 171,000.
And that's way above last year, which is 135,000.
Yep.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's good news, and it'll probably average back out. I mean, it's a little high at the beginning. We don't know what's closed and what hasn't. I mean, that's just averages and numbers can go a lot of different ways.
So we're going to do one featured house this year, 2805 North 25th Street, Fort Dodge.
Okay.
That's out in the Woodlands.
Awesome.
2,133 square foot with a complete full basement underneath, 3-car garage. Built in 2002.
So newer home, 22 years old, which is a newer home in Fort Dodge.
One owner.
Big, lots of room, great neighborhood. What's it cost?
$419.
$419. That'll bring the average up when you sell that.
Yes, it will.
That's okay. It's a beautiful home, though.
It's a beautiful home, so you give us a call if you want to get into that.
Yeah, we'll call Todd anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get into our guest this week. Our guest this week is a Fort Dodge native, currently working as a business partner and regional manager for McClure Engineering, a civil engineering consulting firm. He grew up in Fort Dodge Public School and then received his engineering degree from Iowa State University, go Cyclones, and has worked for McClure in Fort Dodge ever since. He also works as a part-time EMT for Fort Dodge Fire Rescue and is involved in numerous other organizations in a volunteer capacity. He's married to his wonderful wife, Lexi, who is also a Fort Dodge native and works at Webster County Public Health. And if you haven't guessed it by now, and it's probably on the title, we're here with Luke Huggins. Welcome, Luke.
Yeah, good to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, we're glad you're here. So just to get started, we're just going to jump right into it. Tell us about your journey, because there's not a lot of people your age, there is, but not like you are. What brought you to Fort Dodge, and tell us about that journey that brought or kept you here versus going somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, I think about this a lot because, I was like anybody, even though I was from Fort Dodge. When I came back, I wanted to find like-minded people who were closer to my age that were, involved so that I could get to know the community in a different way. And, I'd spent the 4 years at Iowa State, or 4.5, and I came back here every summer to do an internship for the previous 3 summers before I graduated. So, I knew some things, and I was part of, this Internship Plus program through the Growth Alliance, which is like similar to the Leadership Fort Dodge program, if you guys have both been through that.
We've talked about that a lot. Yeah.
Okay, good. So, it's very similar to that, but it was for just any interns who were part of the Growth Alliance organizations, member organizations. And so that was good for me to kind of open my eyes to some of the different organizations and businesses in the community. So I had that exposure as an intern, but then moving back full time, I really wanted to get involved in the community now that in a professional capacity. And so one of the first things I did was go to a Fort Dodge Young Professionals event. It was actually at the Blandon, and it was one of their annual events, and there was like 60 people there. And we always said in Young Professionals, we don't put much of an emphasis on the young or the professional part, so it's really just
so we could all join.
Yeah, anyone could join, and so it was an age range, pretty spread out. A lot of different walks of life in there. But, from that, I met people like Jeremiah. I met people like Brian Peterson and Joe Terrell. And so, as I needed to have my taxes done, or I needed a house to buy, or I needed a water softener, all of a sudden I knew all these people and, kind of got immersed in the community through that group and through those people. And, growing up here, you obviously get to know people and have family friends and, your own friends and get to know their parents. And so I was friends with Dennis Ploutz's son, Aaron Ploutz. And so, growing up, you knew some of these community leaders. And so moving back, it was nice to have that, that community of networking people that are happy to get you plugged in and get you going right away in your professional career.
And Luke and I have coffee every once in a while when we both make it, and it's funny because we're usually the youngest two there. Cameron will show up every once in a while, but it's funny. All our buddies are in their 70s.
Yeah.
It's a whole different generation coming back to, and I think I'm still a different generation than Luke, but it's fun seeing that, the older and the younger kind of pass on that wisdom, and JP always has a little bit of wisdom to pass on to both of us.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what I'd say about getting involved with any of these. You have that generation that's been here for a while, and they've been in these leadership positions, and anybody who's invested any significant amount of time in any organization or any initiative, they want nothing more than for it to carry on, and they're trying to find that next generation to take the take the torch and run with it. So there's plenty of opportunity out there.
Oh, there's
well,
tons.
And that's why Young Professionals is such a big, good organization, and just go, get involved.
Yeah.
Like I said, that one time I went to a national championship game, and I just think I sat right across from you. My wife and the kids didn't want to do anything that night, and sports page right down the street.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, I'm just going to go over there.
I'll go
That's
watch
where
it.
everybody's at, and just got to hang out with people I wouldn't have normally hanged out with that night.
Yeah, and that's what I'd say, anyone interested in getting involved in Young Professionals, I would try several of the events because, you might go to one and there'll be 5 people there, and then you might go to another one and there'll be 40, so just try a few of them, and then if you have ideas on different events, they're happy to try just about anything that would help bring people together.
Absolutely. Well, Luke, as director of the Growth Alliance, what are your primary goals for our community?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's a big question, right? All right, how do you lead the whole region? And so, my role currently is the president of the board of the Greater Fort Dodge Growth Alliance. And, for those that might not be as familiar with the organization, it's generally a chamber of commerce and an economic development organization all rolled into one to support our entire region. And so the Growth Alliance is responsible for economic development for the city and the county and pretty much everyone in between. And so, it's led by private industry, but those two, the city and county, are obviously big partners in that, along with other cities and economic development organizations. And so, my role is really to be supportive for the staff. And so, a big undertaking we had was obviously Dennis Plouts retired, after 48 years, I want to say.
It was a long time with the city.
Yeah, so he was with the city for a long time, with the Growth Alliance for, since its inception. And so when he retired, obviously that put us on this track to hire a new CEO, and then there's been other staff added there too. And so, they're heavily qualified people, very smart, very technically sound, and so we're there to support them. And so, my goal is to be as supportive and, as progressive as we can be into helping our staff, get acclimated in this community, because Astra Ferris is our new CEO, and she moved here from Missouri, brought her family here, and so it's going to be a time to, again, reflect back on that networking and how I can play that role, and how we as members of the Growth Alliance can play that role for our new CEO to get to know people and network, not only locally but statewide and nationally as well.
I met with Astra the other day at a meeting, and she was there, and Jill, and we just kind of talked. We actually had 40 minutes, just the three of us, and it was fun just talking about what's happened over the last 10 years since the Growth Alliance has been going, with somebody who is that invested with the Growth Alliance, yet that new to the community. And okay, this happened here and this happened here. And even Jill Nelson, who grew up here, left, moved to Minneapolis, moved back 4 or 5 years ago. Even with her and talking about how all these things came about, because you and I have kind of seen all this stuff happen, and they're like, well, how'd this happen and how'd this happen? And just to have that candid conversation of this is what's going on, and bringing that new energy and that new light to everything that's happening right here. And it's just cool. I love it. And I'm glad we get to be part of that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's easy to be optimistic about the region because I'm part of so many of these discussions of what's going on that's positive. And now, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of opportunity where we talk about what are the things we could improve, and we highlight and think about some of those things that there's certainly room for improvement. But a lot of the general public doesn't hear about some of the really positive things that are in motion, because you just can't announce things, until everything's signed on the dotted line and it's a for sure deal. So, really happy to see some of the headlines here lately about new retail coming to town and new expansions coming to town. And those kind of things are just, important for us to highlight and recognize that it's a community-wide effort, again, city, county, private industry, and the Growth Alliance kind of in the middle of it all.
And just trying to drive that bus and get people to come here and get all this stuff to happen, because it doesn't just happen. People don't just call and say, hey, I want to do this in Fort Dodge. It's like we're reaching out to companies, we're reaching out to retailers, we're reaching out to developers to get all this stuff done. And
Well, we're making some noise when last year for Fort Dodge Leadership, we were down in Des Moines, and the governor shook my hand and said, "You're from Fort Dodge? Oh my gosh, that's where the Crossroads Mall, what do you call it?
Crossroads Plaza.
Yep.
Plaza is underway." And it's like, wow, that's
And
what
then
she
Crossroads
thought
of
of when
Global
she thought of
Innovation,
Fort Dodge.
you
And
get
she's like, that is
all
a
sorts of
project
crossroads.
that is helping a lot of other people.
Yeah, certainly.
Putting a lot of stuff together. So one of the other things you're involved with, which was very dear to my heart because of Shiny Top, is Main Street Fort Dodge. Main Street's tough. I mean, you're almost competing with the Crossroads Mall and Main Street and putting all that stuff together. So as Main Street, you were president for a while, kind of director, kind of led that bus. What are the visions of Main Street, and what are your visions of what downtown Fort Dodge needs to turn into?
Yeah, so generally I was on the Main Street board, and Main Street was combined with SMID, which was the Self-Sustainable Municipal Improvement District.
Wow.
And so what that means is basically there's an incremental tax that is in the downtown. So downtown property owners, as you know, pay a slightly higher tax, and then that money goes into this fund managed by the SMID board, which then merged with the Main Street group. So really the purpose is to beautify Main Street, help bring new businesses, new tenants, building improvements, all of those kind of things downtown. And so it's an important distinction that it's not to be in competition with the Growth Alliance or other economic development initiatives. It's just another tool to have here in our region. And so right now, my term ended at the end of this last year, so I was on the board for 6 years. And so right now we're between directors in that organization, but the director spends most of their time going through meeting the business owners, helping facilitate with state staff, and really bringing some of those estate dollars back to town. And so that came from different grant opportunities, different loans, having some free technical assistance. So like if you wanted to redo this office space, we could bring in a state design or interior designer that could come in and perform that work for free because we're a Main Street community. There's different grants, if you want to do let's say a couple different new apartments on second story housing and above your shop, again, there's dollars that can come directly from Main Street, Iowa, and they're only accessible because we're a Main Street community. So, I think we struggled still defining what is Main Street's role in Fort Dodge, because in every Main Street community in Iowa, and there are quite a few of them, but some of them are small towns and they don't have a Growth Alliance type organization, or they don't have a city with their own economic developers. And so it becomes, as a Main Street organization in Fort Dodge where we have those, how do we not step on each other's toes to where we're duplicating efforts and maybe hindering the initiatives that we want to push forward for downtown or other places? So
right, all of a sudden you're getting into that argument where you had the Chamber of Commerce and the Development Corp, and they were almost competing over different projects in town.
Right.
And it's the same thing with Main Street, the city, and the Growth Alliance. And how do you bring all those people to the same table under maybe the same kind of guidance?
Yeah, I mean,
to make it happen.
A big part of the Growth Alliance when it was formed was we want to form this one organization so that there's not all these different organizations going to every business asking for money every year. If we give me 500 here, 1,000 there, or whatever. Now you just have the one organization. Well, when you have a Main Street and you bring that in, obviously it can add some of that. That context needs to be there. That it's not a competing organization. It's just making it that much stronger. So. I'll be interested to see how Main Street progresses here in the next future. I mean, say
it's going to be
year or
interesting.
two.
It's super needed. We need to have it here, and we need to keep pushing downtown and make it better and better. And hopefully, we get a director that does exactly that, works well with everybody, and gets things done.
Absolutely.
You can tell in the last 10 years just by walking down how much better it looks.
It's only because Shiny Top's here. Oh wait, no, never mind. McClure Engineering across from Koozies is why.
I'm glad Shiny Top's here. I mean, that live music you guys got going on, I mean, I think that's really helped build a culture that my wife and our families really enjoy. And we spend a lot of time chasing live music. I mean, we were down at Amigos for Jared Benson last night, and we get to Shiny Top a lot of different weeks on the Thursdays and some Saturdays. And so I'm really glad you guys do that.
It's fun having that.
I think
that
of
tie
it
to
like
the community.
20 years ago, like people went out and just drank and played pool, and that's it. And now it's like a fun activity with all the music. And
so if the next Main Street coordinator's listening to this, I really think they need to put a Shag the Drag car show up and down Fort Dodge once a year, just to bring everybody downtown so you can drive up and down. It'd be like
shagging the drag.
It'd be like drinking in the 80s. I don't know if you guys remember, but it was a whole lot of fun shagging the drag.
I don't remember the 80s very well.
Yeah. I remember them, but I wasn't drinking yet.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah, I went to one of the open mic nights on a Wednesday here several weeks ago, and I mean, there were some guys from Clear Lake who came in, and like Jeremy Ober was there, and Jefferson Fossbender and Alex Trevino. I mean, those guys were all there playing and singing and taking turns, and it's like
And that's like the best of Fort Dodge right there in those three names.
yeah, and Jordan Beam, who's another one, he's from like Altoona area. We've been following him a lot lately. He was in town and happened to be playing, and we just went over there because Scott Kirkhart was going over there, and so they all were talking. It's just funny to watch this. And Jordan, he plays all over the state and some in the country, but he was like, you have one of the best music scenes of anywhere that I've been, and to have this kind of support for your local musicians is awesome. And so, I mean, you felt like you were in an underground kind of environment where these guys were all just playing in front of you, and there's all this talent, and there was maybe like 10 people standing there watching all these guys perform. So
It's almost like a private show.
it
with the
was.
best of the
So
best.
I would encourage anyone to go to those open mic nights and continue to support these local artists, because it's pretty special what we've got going on here.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, we got a lot of we had Shelly Bodar on last week, and she's been a big part of that too.
Oh, absolutely.
It's great being able to put all that stuff together and hearing you say this and knowing, hey, we just talked about this 2 weeks ago, and
we're already seeing things flow together.
oh yeah,
When you talk Fort Dodge, there's going to be a lot of things that flow into to help the next thing grow.
Yep. Oh, absolutely. They all come together. But as for you guys with Shiny Top, it's important for me to recognize that there's a lot of different organizations that try something for a week or for a month or maybe even a quarter. But you guys have been doing like the Thursday night music consistently for years.
outside of COVID, it's been 6 years.
Yeah. So I mean, that consistency is what helps build that culture, and so it's that long-term investment and that compounding effect that the time can have. It's really important.
Oh yeah, small business like that. You have to be consistent. You have to do it over and over again, and sometimes it takes time to build.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, switching gears.
Sure.
Volunteer firefighting. Mm-hmm. So have you ever fought a real fire?
I fought a lot of fires. Yeah.
Every day when he goes to work, he
Yep.
puts out six or seven.
Put out fires in the office and then get a call and jump in the truck and go. So
I love it. In that case, I've put out a lot of fires too.
There you go.
yeah.
But the volunteer firefighting, how has that experience helped you impact perspective on community?
Yeah, so in a couple different ways. One, being a volunteer and volunteering for something where your pager goes off and it's 1:30 in the morning and it wakes you and your wife up, and now you got to go, and it's maybe just helping somebody who'd fallen, and it's not putting out a fire, but it's helping somebody in need, and it really just puts into perspective that you're part of this community, and it's really giving back to the community in that sense. But outside of that, you really learn a lot of skills too. So I didn't think growing up, even though everyone wants to be a firefighter or a pilot or whatever when they're growing up, when I thought of that, I didn't think I'm going to be the one holding the jaws of life, cutting a door open to get somebody out someday, and in a volunteer capacity. So I've literally sat here in my office, got done writing an email, a page comes through, get in my truck and go, and then all of a sudden, 10 minutes later, I'm using the jaws of life, or I'm using the hose and putting out a fire. So, I mean, it's building that perspective that the skills you have, regardless of what you do in your day-to-day life, can be used somewhere else, whether you think today that you'd be capable of doing it or not. You don't have to go be a firefighter or, put your life in danger or help other people in that capacity. But there's certainly opportunity for you to expand your horizons a little bit, regardless of what you do. And that's what I've learned and really come to appreciate from that perspective.
Like a lot of volunteering skills. Yeah.
A lot of volunteering. Cool. And we talked about Fort Dodge Fine Arts again. Great places to volunteer if that's more your thing. Volunteer firemen, that's your thing. And you got an award here not too long ago for your work as a volunteer fire department. Can you tell us about that? Wasn't that with the governor? I mean, it was a pretty big deal. Yeah,
so it's funny. Again, we talk about how these things are connected. The state director for Main Street, Iowa, is the one who nominated me for a Volunteer of the Year award through the governor's office. And so part of that came through, volunteering with Badger Fire and, the Growth Alliance and the other things I do. But he got to know me through the Main Street organization, and so that's why he nominated me. But generally, we've had some success in Badger because I got my EMT here a couple years ago, and so when I got that license, I've helped to build the EMS system, within the Badger area. So now we've put 8 new EMTs through the program since then.
Wow.
And so again, I said I got my EMT and helped do that. It certainly wasn't just a Luke effort. It was all the leadership on Badger Fire. It was support from the Webster County supervisors who paid for the class for all these. It was support through Iowa Central for even having the classes and making those night classes available. So, it's, again, a big thing that ties together, but having that EMT perspective has been really important too, because now you get to know the healthcare system. And again,
Yes.
I'm in the engineering world, did the firefighting, but now that's when I got plugged in as the part-time EMT on Fort Dodge and doing the EMT for Badger, where now you're interacting with the hospital staff and you understand the headaches that some people have on dealing with, healthcare in general. And so again, building that perspective is what keeps me trying these new things. And that's been another positive one for me.
Oh, I can imagine that, it is a big deal. And thank you for your service again. But as a volunteer fireman, that's not easy. And I think there is definitely a need in Webster County and all these small communities for more volunteer firemen. I mean, I was talking to Bob Tho the other day, who said, they're really having trouble in some of these small towns finding enough people for volunteer firefighting, fire rescue, EMTs. And, they're trying to figure out how to, maybe even put some regional full-time fire places in the county. But that costs money. Money comes from taxes. You got to raise taxes to do it. So if we can find the volunteers to do this, I think it helps all of us. So if you are listening and want to volunteer as a fireman, get a hold of your local fire department and see if there's something you can do.
Yeah, and I would also encourage people to follow along with the EMS Essential Service. You've probably seen in the paper the last couple of weeks that the supervisors have been voting to make EMS an essential service, and that's really the first step towards that incremental tax that could become available. But that's going to be a public vote that everyone's going to have to vote on. And it needs 60% to pass. And so the group that's going to define what that system might look like, hasn't been formed yet, but will be in the near future here. So that group will decide, again, is it the full-time station somewhere else, or, is it actively recruiting from some other place? We don't know what that might look like, but continue to follow that along, and hopefully everyone will support EMS being an essential service in this county, because you're exactly right. We need it and need the people. I
mean, lives are at stake. I mean, literally, lives are at stake.
Yep.
We need to get after that. So we're going to switch gears again because Luke does so much stuff. We kind of have to keep this moving. You went to Iowa State to be a civil engineer. Civil engineering, you really have to, just as a job, as a career, you're always thinking forward. What's the next step? What's the next step? What do we have to think of here? How is this going to grow? How is this going to expand? How does that civil engineering background tie into the community development and the stuff that you work on day to day?
Yeah, sure. So, first at Iowa State, I went for mechanical, and then I took civil curriculum as well. So my primary degree is mechanical, so there is that background there. But because I started working for McClure, then I obviously had interest in civil and wanted to get more versed in that. And so that's when I got into the civil curriculum as well. But generally speaking, civil engineering, why I fit so well with it, I feel like, is because you're kind of in the middle of all these things like planning. So again, it's a natural fit for me to be part of an organization like the Growth Alliance, where you're planning for the infrastructure and the economic development needs of different projects. And that's what civil engineers are really there to do. If you want to develop a mall kind of site, then somebody needs to calculate how much stormwater is going to run off, or if we need a detention pond so it doesn't flood over there, or, those kind of things.
Everybody needs a detention pond or two.
Right. So the engineers calculate that, but also just run the performas. And so does it make economic sense for the developers? And so we try to really gear ourselves and our approach to think like the owner, think like a developer, and think like engineers all at once. And, as you all know, Terry Lutz is the chairman of our board still. He's still active every day, and he was the mayor of Fort Dodge. And so he's really instilled in us, you got to think about it from the owner perspective and the client being the city or whoever it may be. And he's also a land developer, so there's a lot of that. Okay, as a developer, here's the things we're looking for. So I lean on my engineer to give me this, this, and this from all these perspectives, and that's what we try to do. And so it's really fun in that, again, if you're progressive and forward-thinking and visionary and entrepreneurial, then civil engineering world can be a really fun place to be.
So one of the speaking of that, so it's the engineering, the development world. How does Fort Dodge differ in developments than, let's say, Ames or Des Moines? Because I know I think I've talked to Terry about this. He's like, I can buy a piece of ground in Fort Dodge, and it takes years, where I buy the same piece of ground in Des Moines with similar attributes, and it takes months. How do you put that into things, and how do you sell that to developers to say, this is a bit of a long-term investment, and maybe it's the city coming in and the county to help, and maybe that all ties together. Can you talk about that just for a second, about how we're different than the bigger markets?
Yeah, when you think of like an Ankeny that's growing so fast all the time, and some of these other communities, Waukee and things, those ones in the Des Moines metro, where it's just known that there's going to be a lot of influx of people there. And so if you don't have that almost guaranteed influx of people coming in, then it's going to take longer to develop new lots.
Changes the equation.
And so how you combat that is you get more partners involved. So you're exactly right. Like you see the city and county coming together to support these different projects at the same table, is so crucial for our region and something that you just don't see in some of these other areas. And that's why, the Ameses and the Clintons and some of these other communities have reached out to say, hey, how does the Growth Alliance work? How does the city and county work together? Because they've got a lot of great things going on. I think when they meet with the governors and the governor Branstad formerly and now Reynolds, they talk about Fort Dodge and what is going on here because of that connection between the city and county and being able to put these competitive incentive packages together, for developers and to not operate at a loss on any end.
Right. That makes sense.
That's great. And you spoke of vision. What is your vision for Fort Dodge?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, heavy question, right? It's like,
heavy question.
Get the magic 8-ball out.
The Luke 2050.
Well, and maybe don't put it like that. Do you see any challenges or opportunities in the near future?
Yeah. So I think there's 42 board members on the Growth Alliance, and I'll just use this as an example because of those 42 board members, it's some of the largest organizations, in our region, and some of them have been at the table the whole time I have, and some are newer. But either way, I think I'm the youngest one in that room. And, I'm the president right now, but I'd like to see throughout my presidency term that we get some kind of succession planning going for the leaders, not only in that room, but kind of community wide. So trying to develop a way to make connections for groups like that. So maybe it's you're on the Young Professionals Board and then you sit in on the Growth Alliance meetings, and someday in your organization, if your leader identifies you as that person, then you'll continue on the Growth Alliance Board, and then maybe you'll jump to the United Way Board, or somehow combining and making sure there's synergy between all these organizations and the people that are on them, because we're a small enough town and a small enough region where you get some good county folks and maybe people from other counties too to be involved, and just making sure there's that succession for all of our organizations so the new people know what's going on and know the history of what went into the decisions that were made today, even if they're the ones making the decisions in 10 years from now, that kind of thing. So my vision is to hopefully lay out some kind of succession planning for the Growth Alliance, since that's one of the main, middle organizations, I'd say, between a lot of the initiatives going on.
They kind of hold everything together.
Yeah.
They're the glue right now.
Mm-hmm.
Bringing new people in so they have 5 or 10 years. You don't get it overnight. I mean, it took me a lot of those meetings before I was like, okay, I can actually say something now. Like I know what's going on, and I'm still just making it up as I go.
Yeah.
But it does take a long time to kind of adjust into those roles. And when everybody on the board is in their 60s now, 70s, you need that young energy to come in and say, okay, who's coming in next? And it takes time to bring those people into the fold.
Yep.
So younger people coming into the community, what advice would you give to people aspiring to be leaders in Fort Dodge?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. One, I think you'll find that generally anybody wants to be supportive of that next generation coming in. So you hear me talking about succession planning. If someone came to me right now and said, hey, I want to be the next president of the Growth Alliance, how do I get there? I'm going to be I'll meet with you every morning for coffee and talk about how to do this, right? Because I want to make sure that we're successful in the future for that organization and any other one that I'm a part of. And so that's, I'm sure, how many others feel. So, ask the question, take somebody out for coffee or for lunch to get to know them, as a leader a little bit better. And then, just go try it. The other thing I'd say is I always applaud people who start new initiatives. And so we need to keep those new, vibrant ideas flowing in this region. Mm-hmm. And so if you're looking for support in that, feel free to reach out to me, because I'd love to help put people in touch with, somebody else that I might know to help drive some of these initiatives.
It would be fun to work together on something like that. Because I had actually one of my sons came to me this morning and said, hey, this is a great idea. What do you think? And I'm like, that's a really good idea. But, think of this way, this, and this, and start putting that generic idea with not a whole lot of education to it to what actually might work on the ground and get things rolling to, just life experience. And I hate saying no, hence you. My plate's never quite full. I can always fill more on it. So can Luke. But that's one of those things to take those young people and say, you know what, I'm more than happy. I met with a gentleman yesterday, and we're going to start going, once a week, we're going to have a meeting until he gets his real estate license. And
yeah,
it's just
that's a great thing.
More than happy to do it.
You can't put a price on good mentorship. So if you can identify some good mentors, locally or elsewhere, they'll certainly help you get there. But if I can play that role in any capacity for anyone, I'd be happy to.
Yep, awesome.
And you guys mentioned it's a small community. You can make an impact in a small community. And I had this couple come to town, and she was working and he was not going to work. And he's like, well, what is my purpose? And he kind of joked about it when we were talking. And I go, well, what do you have a passion for? And he started saying a couple things. I go, you can get on a lot of boards here in Fort Dodge, and they came from the big city and they had all these big ideas and this and that. And he was very passionate. And I was like, oh my goodness, you could serve some boards and make a real impact on our community. And he was really excited at that point.
Yeah. And that brings up another good point, that if you're going to get involved in a board or a committee, make sure it's something you're passionate about. Understand that you're going to have some long board meetings and some long committee meetings, and it might not be, all fun and games the entire time. It's going to put in some work, but hopefully at the end of the day, you look back and you're like, okay, we made a good difference, in this initiative, or, about this thing I care about.
We made our community a better place for, putting that work into stuff.
Well, Luke, let's talk about work-life balance, because I struggle with it. I know Todd struggles with it, and I'm sure you struggle with it. Do you have any strategies?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this a lot over the last, several years probably now, but I've read enough books and trying to maintain these things. And what it really comes down to for me is maintaining a few F words. And what I thought about was, okay, so faith, family, fitness, and finances, okay? So faith, not that you have to have an organized religion, but have something that you believe in, have a moral compass that helps drive your decisions in your day-to-day life.
Yeah.
Again, doesn't have to be an organized religion, but hopefully you find like-minded people to explore that faith with. Family, one of the reasons we came back to Fort Dodge was because both my wife's family and my family are still here. Some people don't have a positive relationship with their family. That's okay. Then your friends or whoever it is that your core group of people are that you lean on, So that, and then the finances, if your financial house is in order, you can pretty much relax on a lot of different things. So when you get some of those kind of things in place, on top of the fitness, and so I try to work out every day because I think working out really clears my head.
Yep.
And then mentally, like I said, read books, get mentorship, all those kind of things to where you're mentally sound. When you have those F words in place, then you can really start to juggle your schedule the way you want. I know that if I go to an extra meeting one night and it's going to make my wife mad because I've already been to 2 that week, then I'm messing up that family portion. I'm not going to do that, right? If I know that something's pulling me away from work too much and now I'm not going to be able to make as much money as I wanted, it might put my financial house, not in order anymore, then I change that direction. So really, I try to keep that foundation of those F words in place, and then, it makes it easier to decide what is it that I want to spend my time on and, prioritize in my life without jeopardizing those things.
I like that. And you also showed by saying those things, you're also flexible to those things.
Yes.
Like you want to take care of those 4 things, but you'll be flexible. And like my case, like during the summer, we get very, very busy. So my wife has to go home, take care of the kids every night when I'm out showing houses. So what I'll do is I cut my schedule at 4:00, go pick up the kids, take them home, start supper, and then start my showings at 6. So it's like time management. You got to, what relieves her, because we need her happy, because if she ain't happy, nobody's happy.
We just, so Joyce and I do the same thing. I mean, we work together all the time. So we actually work. She writes all the checks, does accounts payable for everybody. So it's kind of funny how I can spend 4 hours on the phone with my wife and then be home. And it's like, hey, here we are, Joyce. We're still here and we've been talking all day. But that's such an important part of what I do is having that relationship with her and the grandkids. And we babysat a couple of them this week, so it's fun, and you get to have that. But that's an important and
and it's different for every person, right? So you stop at 4, maybe you stop at 5, maybe I stop at 6, whatever it is. But as long as you got those foundational principles in line, then you're going to be okay.
Yeah, everything else works. So we asked Shelley this last week about opportunities for somebody coming to Fort Dodge to get involved. What advice or what opportunities are there for people moving to Fort Dodge or longtime residents, people who have been here, to get involved? Where would you send somebody that said, hey, I just want to get involved in the community?
I think first I'd send them to meet with Jill Nelson at the Growth Alliance, because she spent a lot of time as the community development director and got to know so many different organizations that are around here, and she's been part of Leadership Fort Dodge, where she's visited all these different organizations and different people and knows a ton of people in town. So that'd be a good place to start. I mean, obviously there's a lot of really good service clubs that you could get involved with. Like we talked about earlier, if you want to start something, that's even better. We'd love to help find the people to help galvanize that effort. But generally speaking, there's a lot of opportunity to get involved in whatever you may want because of those generational effects that we've talked about already. And so just, you got to get out there and ask the question. Like I said, if there's somebody I can help put you in touch with, or if you want to just talk through some ideas, feel free to reach out to me at any time. I'm at McClure Engineering downtown most days.
That's all. Yeah, and that's exactly, she was more in the art. So, hey, give me a call. I'll let you know if you want to be in a play or if you want to sing or you want to do whatever. So, if you want to get that
Because you
community
might want to be
involvement.
more involved in business. You
Right.
might want to be more involved in trails. I mean, those guys started up that bike trail just because they wanted it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And now it's like one of Fort Dodge's trail is like one of the biggest in the mid.
Yes.
I can go from
In
my house
Iowa
to
or whatever.
Badger.
Yep.
And they're working on it now, so with no frost in the ground, rashes out there digging as we speak, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a positive deal.
Yeah. So just closing thoughts. Anything else you'd like to kind of share with people thinking about moving to Fort Dodge, longtime residents?
You know, again, when I spend my time thinking, especially when I'm working out on what are some of those guiding principles for me and why we move back and all those kind of things, you know, one that I've thought about, I don't know if you guys have read Atomic Habits or The Compound Effect is one recently. And then I talked to Coach Campbell from Iowa State, and he had his team read Pound the Stone. So that's another one. But those three books have a similar kind of ideology that, you know, you try to get 1% better every day, and you build these habits to where you're compounding it. And so, again, when I think of finances, of course, I love compounding interest. You know, Warren Buffett says it's the eighth wonder of the world. Well, how do you compound that in the rest of your life? And so I think you do that by maximizing the relationships that you have and the amount of relationships. And so think of, if you choose to move back to Fort Dodge, you're able to compound all those relationships that you had before you left to continue to grow them throughout the rest of your life. And so maybe that's those people introducing you, like Dennis Plouts introduced me to so many community leaders when I moved back. You know, those kind of things that are compounding effects because you chose to spend more time investing in yourself and investing in the region, and, you know, just coming back to again, exercise those relationships. So that's what I would encourage people to do. If you're thinking about coming back, understand that those relationships can grow into something that you never imagined. And you can, maybe you don't want to be the community leader person, but you want to lead some specific initiative or just be part of something bigger than yourself. Those
can hide in the
opportunities
shadows.
come. Yes, or hide in the shadows. I mean, every role is needed, right? And so, but you're going to maximize those opportunities by compounding those relationships and compounding your time in a specific area or field. So this is a good place to do it. It's better than any from my perspective.
Oh, I agree completely. I've done more in Fort Dodge than I could ever done in any community I think I could ever went to. And I have a really good friend that moved from Des Moines to here. He's an accountant, and he said if I was still in Des Moines, I'd be working in a cubicle still. Here I own my own accounting firm, and he's been reaching out, buying firms in other small towns. And he goes, it's like the land of opportunity if you put your mind to it and you start making those relationships. And it's unbelievable.
Yeah, and I'd be remiss not to thank McClure Engineering for providing that flexibility, like you talked about. From all those things, McClure's been nothing but flexible for me, and we have one of the best offices of people you could ask for. So, you know, it's nice when you don't have to work because you love what you do and you love the people that you're there with. So, you know, if there's any engineering students, we're always recruiting those too, or other engineers.
Heck yeah,
so,
call Luke.
Yeah, send them my way.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for your time today. We really appreciate it, and we love your passion for Fort Dodge, everything you've done for Fort Dodge, and we'll keep reaching out to you if we have anything. And once again, Luke makes himself available.
What you're doing.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we appreciate the new initiatives, and this is one of those where you guys want to care about Fort Dodge and share what's going on here. So I really appreciate you guys taking this time and starting something new and having me on today.
Yep, we'll keep doing it. And in 2 weeks, we're going to have Mike Larson on to talk about the Veterans Bridge. I don't know if you guys know it, but Veterans Bridge has been named Veterans Bridge for 40 years, but nobody ever knew it was Veterans Bridge. So we're going to start making some changes. And he's got some initiatives he's going to talk about here in a couple of weeks to say this is what we want to make it into, and this is how we're going to make it.
We might put some pretty lights on there.
We're going to put some pretty. One of them's going to say Army. That's the cool part. All right.
Very
Thank you, Luke.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
That's a wrap at today's episode of Talk Fort Dodge.
Stay connected with us on social media and join us next time as we continue exploring Fort Dodge's stories through the lens of 2 lifelong Dodgers. I'm Jeremiah Condon.
And I'm Todd McCubbin, and this is Talk Fort Dodge.